392 days. That's how long I've been a delivery driver. It's 302 days longer than expected. Originally, I got this as a second job during the summer to make extra money and have the ability to take my family out and do nice things. Honestly, the job has grown on me a great deal and has boosted our income by quite a bit. On a good week, I can make up to nearly $400 extra in cash alone. And that's not including hourly pay that I get every 2 weeks. If you put aside the money benefit, the customers also make it worthwhile. A typical customer ranges a lot from college kid to parents ordering their kids food because they don't feel like cooking. Whatever the reason behind the order doesn't faze me, just as long as they tip. Lastly, my coworkers, fellow drivers, are, for the most part, easy to work with and around. Nobody is cutthroat and out to one-up another for a few bucks. It makes work that much more enjoyable. I guess I should mention I don't drive for a big city, but for a more rural town. Mostly everything is spread far apart from each other, and we're the only delivery place in town. There's other restaurants, but customers have to travel to them. The nearest major city is San Antonio, which is about an hour north. Every town and city has its stories, or folklore if you will. Ours has dark tales, so dark you'd think they were real, but not many people speak of them. Every so often you hear murmurs or low whispers. The one that stuck with me since my wife shared it with me because this is her hometown and she knows all the ins and outs, is the tale of the occult. It's your average run-of-the-mill story, but there's something about it that has always haunted me. I'm going to divulge it just as she did to me. The year was 1978. The town we call home was a metropolis and business was, as they say, booming. There was a gold rush in the mines just on the county lines, and this attracted thousands of walks of life from around the country. Eventually, it became too much to handle. People started getting hurt, robbed, and even killed. 2 people were trampled to death and 3 were crushed by one of the mines collapsing onto them. This madness had to be stopped. But how? Benjamin Keene knew that answer. Benjamin conjured up a plan. He and a few buddies, Kevin Steeble, Paul Michael, and Alan Granny, would come together and pose as evildoers that were a part of a group, and they would do things to scare off outsiders that were disrupting the harmony of their peaceful town. These scary things would vary depending on what the group had at their disposal. It started off small, throwing on hooded cloaks and chanting in some made-up language that sounded like tongues outside the mines. This would deter even the bravest of souls. After that, they would blatantly chase people away and the police wouldn't do a thing. They were too tired of the traffic that had invaded their town. Eventually, their tactics escalated to more severe things like murder. Nobody could prove it was them, but the town had a pretty good idea. The first murder was a woman. She was in her 20s. Her throat had been cut and blood drained. Her body was disposed of like a piece of trash and dumped in front of the mines. Over the span of 2 years, dozens of people went missing. All of them were never heard from again. After the rush had stopped, the murders didn't. In fact, they became worse. Eventually, the bodies started being disposed of naked. Word spread around town like a forest fire that there was an occult at large and they were sacrificing locals during ritualistic events. This spooked everyone. The town went from a safe haven to being suddenly dangerous. But just as quick as the murders started, they stopped. It's as if the occult vanished into the night. Benjamin and his friends were never seen or heard from again. Fast forward to present time, it's a couple of years of the town's history that nobody really speaks of. It's one they feel. If it goes unacknowledged, then it didn't happen. I am one of those people. Well, at least I was. The night it happened was like any other. Nothing special. I arrived at work 5 minutes late from having snoozed my afternoon alarm one too many times, 5:05 to be exact. It was a night I was scheduled to close, which wasn't until 2 a.m. As soon as I entered my numbers, Charles, the manager, yelled from behind that there was a delivery already up for me. I gathered the allotted change they gave us and grabbed the pizzas and headed out. My car is an older car without Bluetooth, so I always put in my headphones and listened to a pre-downloaded playlist of music. As the music started playing in my ears, I pulled out of the parking lot onto the rural road and was now en route to my delivery. When I arrived, everything had gone smoothly, but they stiffed me on the tip. Nightfall ascended rather quickly that night. Although I never had any issues, delivering at night has always made me wary. In my mind, nothing good happens after night strikes. 1:50 a.m. came quickly with the flow I was in that night. My last delivery came up Marrow Road, a road I was familiar with, seeing as two of the residents who lived on the road frequented our little pizza shop often. I loaded up my car and headed out. Marrow Road is a secluded section of the town, just out in the outskirts. It's one that's buried between a dense wooded area that stretches for hundreds of acres. As I drove through the wooded section of the road, the darkness that was night became even thicker, and I was forced to turn on my high beams to prevent hitting any wild animals. My driver's side front tire exploded with a loud pop. I swerved slightly and came to a stop on the side of the road. I put my hazards on and got out of the car to assess the situation. The rim was bent. Even if I replaced the tire, it wouldn't have gone all the way due to the bent rim. I yelled an obscenity at the top of my lungs, which set my voice echoing through the midnight air. Plan B. Check my cell phone so I could call for help. I called the store and texted my boss several times. No answer. My only choice in that moment was to wait for a response. And so I did. I waited and waited, nearly an hour of sitting in my car with the hazards flashing passed by. As I looked down at my phone and scrolled through the latest pointless dribble that was my newsfeed, something large in size moved swiftly past my headlights. The sudden absence of light had caused my head to spring up, but there was nothing, at least that I could see in that moment. I opened my car door and stepped out. Cautiously, I moved towards the front. On the ground, I failed to notice the trail of blood that ran across the street from whatever that thing was. I squinted as I tried to get a better look into the dark woods from where I stood. Ultimately, I decided to get back into the car, but as I did, a loud, ferocious, bellowing shriek came from that wooded area. I'm not typically a fast-moving person. My thought process is, we'll get there when we get there. Not in that moment. In that moment, I moved quicker than I ever have before, and I leaped into the car and slammed the door shut, locking it just as fast. I waited with great anticipation for something to emerge from those woods, and nothing did. My heart, that had been thundering in my chest, had started to settle down to a smoother, more manageable pace. I panicked while I tried to come up with a plan for escape. I had to get help, because who knows what thing made that noise. It was a noise I hadn't heard an animal make before, and honestly, it sounded human. It hit me. My delivery was only a quarter mile away, and there was a tire iron in my trunk. I could use that as a weapon just in case. So, I did. I got out of my car and retrieved the tire iron from my trunk. I gripped it tightly as I started to jog up the dark country road. Behind me, near where my car sat, I heard scraping against the pavement. It sounded as if an animal's nails were scraping against it while it walked. My jog suddenly turned into more of a run. The sound of the nails against the asphalt also picked up in speed. Buried off of the road in the thin area of trees was a house with its porch light on. I sighed a breath of relief and ran off the road towards the home. I followed the road to the considerably large home. It was a 2-story cabin-esque looking estate. The exterior was made up of thick oak wood with a giant glass front door. On the sides of the front door were windows. These weren't regular windows, but stained glass ones that looked similar to the ones you would find in cathedrals. I marched up the front door and knocked with a heavy hand on the glass. No answer. I rung the bell several times in rapid succession. I peered through the glass door and could see someone finally responding to my knocks and rings. They moved with urgency. The door swung open, and in its frame stood a middle-aged woman. She wore thick Coke bottle glasses and had her hair pulled back into a messy bun. The look she offered was one of intensity and direct focus. "Who the hell are you, and what the hell are you doing way out here?" she inquired. A moment had passed before I spit out the answer. I had car troubles just up the street and needed to use your phone. You mean you don't have a phone? This world runs on cell phones. I nodded and smiled fakely. I mean, mine's dead. Can I use yours? Before she answered, a branch snapped somewhere from behind me. We both looked out in the same time, but could only make out dark woods. Get inside, and we'll possibly let you use the phone. She stepped out of the way and I entered. She closed the door and locked it behind me. Just wait over there in the living room and I'll be back. I followed to where her finger pointed and saw the spacious living room that was wide open with a vaulted ceiling. I scurried over to the living room and sat on her black leather sectional. The time on my watch had read 2:32. Why hadn't anyone from the store called? I had gone well over time allotted for delivery. The woman entered the living room after several minutes of absence. She held a landline phone in her grip. She looked at me as if trying to determine if I had been lying or telling the truth. After what I feel was her determination, she had begun to hand me the phone, but stopped at the sound of a loud knocking coming from her front door. "Now what?" she exclaimed angrily. Silence had fallen over the house, and only her footsteps filled the air, followed by the door opening. "Yes?" Her voice had floated around the corner to me. There was no response to her question. She did let out a deafening scream. I ran and peered around the corner. She was crawling away from the doorway, blood trailed behind her. A hooded man who wielded a knife stepped into the house, his appearance hidden in the darkness of his hood. He was tall and broad-shouldered. He hadn't seen me yet. I continued watching as he walked up and put his boot on the woman's back, stopping her from crawling. He raised his considerably long knife in the air and stabbed her several times in succession, blood flinging from the blade every time he swung it through the air. Fuck. Fuck! I looked around and there was a winding staircase at the other side of the living room. I moved as quickly as I could to that staircase. The top seemed so far from me, but I hooved it as quickly as I could, skipping every other step along the way. I entered the master bedroom at the end of the long, seemingly endless hallway. I went straight to the window to find an escape route, but discovered something shocking. What must have been dozens of hooded people standing, spreading throughout the yard, all facing the house. Each of them held similar knives. Before any of them saw me, I had dropped to my knees and panted heavily as I tried to conjure up a different plan. Nothing came to mind. The only thing I thought of was I had to fight. Fight or die. I searched her room madly for a gun, or any type of weapon really, seeing as my tire iron was downstairs on the couch. Nothing. Leaving that room empty-handed wasn't an option. Under the bedpost there were drawers, and in one of those drawers was a revolver. I checked if it was loaded, and it was. Fully. I have never been a killer. Hell, killing bugs is hard for me. I usually shoo them away with an object, so, despite having the gun, I was still nervous as I exited the bedroom. The house had gone silent, utterly and completely silent. I fretfully made my way down the winding staircase. My heart had picked up and paced around every turn, every blind spot. I reached the bottom, and still there was no sign of anybody. As I rounded the corner to the back door, the hooded man stepped out and swung his knife at me. I dodged it. The blade had grazed my shirt. I ran backwards, never taking my eyes off of him. He followed in pursuit by taking giant outstretched steps. I put the hammer back on the revolver and shot him multiple times. Each bullet made a giant hole. After emptying the chamber, he collapsed to the ground and blood ran out of his wounds. I tossed the gun down and grabbed the man's knife as I headed outside. My grip on the handle became tighter and tighter, almost until my hand hurt. Despite my presence, all the hooded figures stood eerily still, never taking their attention off of the house. Something about it was drawing their attention, and I didn't give a shit as long as it meant I could get the hell out of there. And that's what I did. I ran through those woods as fast as I could. My strides were great until it happened. A bear-like creature tackled me hard to the ground. Its jaws opened up, revealing many layers of razor-sharp teeth. Right before it devoured me face first, I stabbed it in the neck. Blood spewed from its mouth all over my face. It struggled for a minute. As it continued to try and bite me, I dug the knife deeper into its throat until its efforts ceased. Its limp body collapsed on me. With all the strength I could muster at the time, I crawled out from under and ran like hell. Surprisingly, I escaped those woods and never looked back. My family and I loaded up the car and got the hell out of that town. My wife didn't ask questions. She could tell I was shook, and something was wrong. We left and never looked back. I'm not sure what happened to all those people, but I never told a soul what occurred that night. Maybe they still stalk those dark woods. Or they've moved on to another location. If I could offer you one piece of advice, it would be to stay out of the woods.